I traveled solo to the Republic of Georgia, where I faced various on-road problems. And I've called this driving disasters because there were a number of disasters. I tend to travel with very little planning and pre-preparation. I know there's a better way of doing things. I usually arrive at an airport, hire a car, grab a map. Sometimes I would have booked a first night stay somewhere, but usually just head off into the great unknown and go wherever the wind blows. So I arrive in Georgia and I go to hire a car. The only car available is this American Dodge, a bigger car than one that I would normally hire. I usually go for quite a small car. And I decided to hire a GPS. They didn't have a map. I'd never used a GPS before, but I thought Georgian is a language I don't understand. It's best I get a GPS. So at the time, I wrote this that I'm going to read it to you. I wrote this letter to Miss Garmin, my GPS. I met Miss Garmin for the first time. I have never felt a need to get to know her before, as I generally have a good sense of direction. But being in a country with an unusual language, Georgian, I thought it best to take her out. Her parents advised me that she knew exactly where all the tourist places were, as she had been well taught and programmed and spoke exceptionally good English. They even told her where my guest house was. So off I headed into the great unknown with my new best friend, Miss Garmin. Well, we did not hit it off too well at first. She refused to speak English, and no matter how much I begged, cajoled, threatened, and beat her, she flatly refused to give up her native tongue of Russian. A police car pulled up next to me, and I was told in an incredibly angry tone that I was not allowed to be stopped where I was. I explained my predicament, and the police officer read her the riot act, and she started to speak English. Miss Garmin led me off to Tsinamvrishvili Street, as taught to her by her parents. How lovely, I thought. My guest house is in the country. Funny though, because when I saw the pics on booking.com, it looked like it was in the middle of the city. The guest house looked like no other guest house that I have ever seen, and a kind man pointed me to go inside. Oh, a guest house in a winery. How wonderful is that? To cut a long story short, there are two Tsinambrishvili streets in Tbilisi. And although this was the one I wanted, this was not the one where I was sleeping. A quick glass of wine and a reprimand to Miss Garmin, and we were on the road again. This time she was wonderful and took me straight to the guest house. Day 2 started off with Miss Garmin refusing to listen to me and me refusing to listen to her. She took me up and down the smallest and narrowest street she could find in Tbilisi. It was interesting to see how the people of the city live. But after an hour and 3 completely different directions from 3 different people, including a cop and a taxi driver, I was getting a little fed up. In exasperation, I told Miss Garmin to go somewhere else in a completely opposite direction, and she finally got me to the edge of town. Finally, we were on the road into the country. Miss Garmin was totally intolerant of my whimsical nature. Oh, look, there's an interesting road. I wonder where it goes. Recalculating, recalculating, recalculating. Oh, shut up, will you? Miss Garmin, Miss Garmin, Miss Garmin. You started shouting at me and said that I was doing more than the speed limit of 120 kilometers per hour, when in fact I was only doing 75. Oh dear, why did you not warn me that I was driving an American Dodge and it was measured in miles per hour? Why did you not warn me of the pothole on the side of the road? If you had, I would not have shredded a tire. Now, I'll just stop reading for a minute to just share a little bit more about that experience with my tire. I can change a tire. I've changed many tires in my lifetime, but you've got to know where the tire is. I opened the back of the car, no tire. I didn't know where the tire was, not realizing that it was actually underneath the car. Standing there helpless, finally, two men came to my rescue and they changed my tire. The tire was shredded and it could not be repaired. And the local village where I had the burst tire had no spare for me to purchase. So I had to continue on my way without a spare. It's not the first time it's happened to me. It happened to me in Turkey as well, where I landed up driving for 2 weeks on the spare little biscuit wheel. Now, I can talk a lot about the driving in Georgia. Often when friends of mine came back from their holidays, they would say, "Oh, that country has the worst drivers in the world." And I've said that myself on many occasions. The Georgians may not be the worst drivers, but boy, they are the most dangerous and the most idiotic drivers that I've ever seen. And I've had not an inconsiderable amount of experience of driving in foreign countries. They seem to have a basic rule of the road. The person who is overtaking has the right of way, and you just get out of the way. And it doesn't matter if there are potholes or animals in the road, you just get out of the way. There were cattle and pigs, and if that means pulling over onto the dirt, hitting a pothole, it doesn't matter. You just get out of the way. The overtaking car seems to have the right of way. And I saw cars overtaking 5 or 6 cars on a blind rise with a solid white line. Some of those roads were in very, very poor condition, windy roads, really bad roads, and these crazy, crazy drivers overtaking on a solid white line, overtaking trucks. You can't see what's coming in the other direction. I pulled over many times, and that is also why I hit the pothole in the previous story. I was scared driving in Georgia. I wanted to take photographs, but I was most of the time gripping onto the steering wheel. I'm not exaggerating. I've never been so scared in my life. It happens so often. On one occasion, it took me 9 hours to drive 350 kilometers. So, back to Miss Garmin. Why did you not warn me that your parents at the car hire company had not put water in the radiator? If you had, the car would not have overheated, and I would not have lost another 2 hours. A policeman in a car shouted at me over his loudhailer, telling me that I was not allowed to stop there. A woman on the side of a country road with the bonnet up, she did not stop to help. Neither did at least 100 other cars and trucks. I guess that's because of my size. I look like any other large and strong Georgian farm woman capable of taking care of herself. Finally, I managed to flag down a car with 2 men and a woman in it. After leaving me for half an hour, they returned with 5 liters of water. Miss Garmin and I were off again. Miss Garmin and I were becoming closer and closer. Even though Miss Garmin and I got closer and closer, we still didn't quite hit it off, and she got me lost a number of times. Getting lost is not always a bad thing because it takes you to unusual villages, places where you possibly would never have explored. And I love that. I love going off the beaten track. So I am grateful to Miss Garmin. At one stage, I was totally lost. I stopped to ask a policeman. He couldn't speak English. They radioed through to the head office, spoke to somebody at the head office who told me to turn back as I was now entering the disputed and conflict zone of southern Ossetia. I don't like double backing. I don't like doing the same route again. So I asked Miss Garmin to take me somewhere else, which she did, and it was a great experience. However, I was very lost and it was getting dark and I didn't know where I was going to land up for the night. So I didn't stop and take many photographs because I was really desperate to get to some village so I could spend the night safely in a comfortable bed. I'm Lois, your friend for forgiveness, and I run the channel Walking Without Skin, which is about overcoming obstacles. It's about getting unstuck. It's about finding your feet after a failure. And I would love you to please subscribe and to watch my videos. More videos on my blunders on Mission Mojo, the videos on finding your feet after failure, and there's a lot more to be seen on my channel as well. So please do subscribe, do watch the various videos, and do give me feedback. I'd love to hear what you would like to know more about. Thank you, and fly free.